I'm Thomas Graf from eFellowsNet. I work for this company since 1999. And for the last 18 or 17 years, I have to do with MBA programs. So I welcome everyone warmly to this webinar on career perspectives with an MBA. And we have a fantastic expert here tonight. It's Mrs. Ewa Maciejewski, Vice Director, Head of Strategic Projects, Corporate Relations and Careers at the University of St.Gallen. And I could not imagine a better person to discuss the career perspectives of an MBA. Welcome, Ewa, and I hope you can hear me well.
Thank you very much, Thomas. It's a pleasure to be here. And to the audience, feel free to switch your cameras on now and then if you like. It's always nice to see faces. I look forward to answering any challenging questions from the audience and from you, Thomas.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Ewa. I also would like to welcome Mr. Jonas Ravensburg. He's the Head of Talent Acquisition and MBA Community Engagement at the University of St.Gallen. Jonas, you can hear me well?
I can hear you well. Thank you for the introduction.
Jonas is the best person to ask if you have any questions on entry requirements and all that stuff, or content and structure of the programs. So
yes, I will not be so involved as Ewa is. I'm just going to here to observe and listen and learn.
Perfect, perfect. So how is this webinar structured? We have 60 minutes or a little bit more if you need. And I will ask some interesting questions, hopefully interesting and helpful for you and beneficial. If you're interested in an MBA program, I will ask questions and we'll start a dialogue with Ewa. And in the meantime, you can pose your question in the chat. I will not immediately direct your questions to Ewa. I will wait, sometimes bundle them, but definitely at the end of this webinar, we will answer all these questions and try to not to forget any one of these. So, career perspectives with an MBA. Ewa, let me ask you my first question. It's COVID times, or could we say maybe post-COVID times? Is it really worth it doing an MBA right now in these times? What would you say?
I would say yes, it's definitely worth it. So, I mean, the answer to this question, which pops up all the time in the media, especially, is the MBA worth it? I mean, it's a binary question, and it's really the answer to that is yes and no. My answer to that is, of course, yes. The slightly longer answer is yes, but not for all, and we can unpack that going forward in the webinar. I'm happy to answer more detailed questions on that. But let's look at COVID, because this is a very interesting time we're going through. And as you said, Thomas, I mean, we could think about it. We are still in COVID, or is it post-COVID? And how that has impacted the job market in general, but specifically for MBAs. So I can only say the following. Last year was difficult. We will not hide the fact that last year was difficult. I think we all know that the job market pretty much froze in March last year. This year, the job market has opened up with a big bang. And what I mean by that is there's been a year and a half of a hiring freeze that companies need to catch up on. So there's a great need to hire new talent, right? I mean, we're talking volumes of talent, but also there are really new, very interesting roles emerging. Because what COVID has also done is it has accelerated business transformation, and particularly with a focus on digital transformation. So we're seeing some very interesting roles emerging that are just a superb fit for MBAs graduating. So let me just succinctly summarize here. The answer is yes. This is possibly the best year to graduate actually from an MBA program. If I look at the last 4 years, I would say this is actually the best year to graduate as an MBA. And the evidence for that in our program is that we're seeing the offers coming in at a much faster rate at this time of the year than we would usually expect. So it's a yes, yes, and yes.
Oh yeah, I buy your argument that the companies employers have to catch up now. Now, the University of St.Gallen obviously is based in Switzerland, and as far as I know, most of your students are actually living in Switzerland. Let's talk a little bit about the career perspectives in Switzerland. Is it a good place right now to do an MBA in Switzerland and to find an employer afterwards in Switzerland?
My answer to that is yes, yes, and yes. So I just want to say a little bit to those who are not familiar with Switzerland. It's a very unique country. It's very small, obviously compared to Germany. You know, it's 8 million people in Switzerland, 80 million in Germany. So there you see very clearly the difference in the scale of the markets. However, what makes Switzerland very interesting is it's very well positioned. It has gone through the crisis relatively well. It has emerged from the crisis relatively well. And that's partially, possibly mostly a function of the kinds of industries that operate here. So as an example, in comparison to Germany, which relies heavily on the automotive industry, we don't have this in Switzerland. So we have not been, let's say in that sense, as impacted. So we are very, very well placed to move forward. You might not get that by looking at GDP rates of 2020, but there is definitely potential for growth, I would say. So this is an interesting country to look at if, you know, one is thinking, and I'm relating now back to the title of this webinar, thinking about career perspective. That means long term, right? Long term.
Right.
I make a decision.
Right.
Not only where do I do my program, where do I invest my time during that 1 year study period, if it's full-time or 2 years part-time, but also where do I want to pursue my career over the next 5 years. So it's not a bad country to look at, I would say.
I like the country a lot. Now let's talk a little bit more about the industry. You just mentioned that Germany is famous, of course, for its automotive industry. So what about Switzerland? What are the career perspectives for your students in Switzerland? Is it primarily the banking sector or the financial sector, in your opinion?
Absolutely not. So this is a little bit of a myth. Let's say, you know, Switzerland is just about finance. So yes, economically, the financial services sector is what carries the Swiss economy. However, if we just look at where our graduates land jobs, this is a very strong indicator of where are their opportunities. And so let me just list these industries. So we've got pharma, which is booming, manufacturing, especially post-COVID, let's face it. COVID has accelerated the pharma industry. There's a vast potential for growth. It never stopped growing, in fact. There's manufacturing, which is doing pretty well. There's huge amounts of investment going into manufacturing sector. And by manufacturing, I mean pretty sexy companies like Siemens, ABB, you know, we're talking robotics, AI. There's huge amounts of investment going into manufacturing in order for Switzerland to remain competitive on the global market. Financial services, now the banking sector is not particularly known for growth. In fact, it has possibly been shrinking a little bit, but in the times of COVID, it's done incredibly well. You know, this is not a center of investment banking. If you want that, go to London or New York. But this is about private wealth, and there's a lot of private wealth in Switzerland. So it's done very well. And within financial services, you also have the insurance sector, and there this sector is booming. Then we have technology. I mean, if you can think of one industry that you would put your money onto, and in fact, just look at the performance of the stock market in the last year and a half, that you put your money on technology, right? This is booming. And it's not surprising that, you know, we have companies like Google, who chose to have its European headquarters here in Zurich. We have Microsoft, we have IBM. I mean, why are these companies here, right? Question that I can happily answer later on. And we have consulting. Now, consulting is an interesting one. In some ways, the boutique consult, or the big three perhaps, is a bit of a closed shop, and it's not that large of a sector. But if we look at the big four, the picture is slightly different. And again, what we're seeing, interestingly, I've just finished a course in M&A with EY and another one with Deloitte on the topic of tech-driven M&A, and M&A is booming. So there are parts of the consulting sector that are growing, and in fact are very much open to recruitment of talent, not only locally, but globally. So I hope I outlined, I just summarized pharma, manufacturing, financial services, technology, and consulting. If any of those industries are of interest to the audience, then Switzerland is potentially a country to consider.
Okay, perfect. Now, before we move on to the employment reports of St.Gallen, I would like to stick with the industry topic for a second. Are there any transformation regarding these industries maybe due to digitalization, due to COVID, any transformation in these industries in the last 12, 24 months that you can observe?
Yes, and there I want to relate this back to the title of this. I would like this to be useful to young professionals thinking long term, and this is what an MBA is for, actually. So maybe very quickly, I'd return to the first question: is an MBA worth it? Mm-hmm. I'd like to unpack this a little bit first, if that's okay. So there are two perspectives. One is a short-term perspective when thinking about that question, and the other one is a long-term perspective. So if you're thinking about short-term perspective, you're going to be evaluating the value of an MBA by comparing the job immediately before an MBA to the job immediately after. And also you'll be comparing the salaries, right? So plus the costs. The cost. So you will be driven to look at some hard numerical facts. If you take a longer term perspective, the picture starts to be a little bit more complex, more interesting, actually. So in the long term, and by long term, let's take 5 years, okay? Because we're going to go back to answer your question on the industry. In the 5 years, how will that MBA propel me or help me to navigate my career trajectory going forward? And trajectory is not necessarily upwards, it could be diagonally adjusting, or it could be actually switching. So when I think a bit more long term, the most obvious question to ask here, the second question is, where will the jobs be? How will the MBA help me to secure an exciting role in the next 5 years? And in order to answer that, just ask yourself, so what will the industries of the future look like? Or what will the industry that you're interested in look like in 5 years? And it will look quite different. So let me explain that. Just use a concrete example of, let's say, the pharma industry. Like any other industry, is going through, the COVID has been an accelerator of digital transformation, right? So what does it actually mean? And this is what we do actually during the MBA program. We unpack these issues for people. We discuss how they can think about their career through a number of workshops and informational sessions and coaching sessions. So, okay, digital transformation, what does that mean in the world of pharma? So the world of pharma is transforming basically from providing medical treatments to providing customer-centric digital journeys, where we have to completely reconsider the design of our services and so on. Okay, great. So what does that mean? Well, probably what that means is that if you're, already coming from a relatively technical background, plus you can combine the MBA skill set, you probably have several very interesting options to consider. But it's not just technical. By technical, I don't mean, you're an IT engineer. Right. I mean that you have an affinity for technology, you worked with technology, you can use digital tools. That's probably going to be relatively interesting. So in that shift from, let's say, products, medical treatments to digital services, certain new roles are emerging. So roles around digital transformation, which basically means, designing new digital services and products, but also cross-functional roles, because in this age of transformation, the need to work cross-departmentally is ever on the up. And so cross departmental work is effectively what we train MBAs to do, because an MBA is a cross-functional degree, right? Yeah. And on top of that, I think the third kind of role that's really emerging in the world of pharma is people are looking for holistic entrepreneurs, because to design entirely, we're not just tweaking products, we're designing entirely new products. So companies are looking for holistic, general thinking entrepreneurs. And that's effectively also what an MBA teaches you. An MBA gives you that toolkit to think creatively.
How is an MBA qualified to become a holistic entrepreneur?
Okay, let me maybe drill down into that again. So an MBA is not a program you take if you necessarily, I think, to become an entrepreneur immediately post MBA. But what it does is it gives you entrepreneurial skills. So you are going to be able to talk finance, and because you can, and marketing, let's say, which I think, and strategy, let's say, finance, what did I say? Finance, strategy, and marketing. These are the three things you need to have, actually, to start to think about writing a business plan. We will teach you how to write a business plan. We will teach you how to pitch your idea, which is much harder than people think. You know, it's not just getting up there on stage. I mean, this is like practice, practice, practice. And so I'm not saying that the MBA turns out entrepreneurs, but what I'm saying is that it turns out graduates with very advanced entrepreneurial skill set that then enables them to maybe in 5 years' time set up their own business, or alternatively, they become the intrapreneurs working inside companies, inside innovation companies, or maybe even working on deals where between corporates and startups, because this is really the future actually of business. The future is business is to do with startups and corporates partnering together to build that muscle of innovation going forward.
I think I should bring you in contact with Stefan Klaschka, or him with you. When I teach my MBA students at Kempten University Innovation, I always use the Boehringer Ingelheim case, talking about pharma. And Stefan Klaschka was the prototype of an entrepreneur, of someone who thinks holistically as an entrepreneur within a company, across divisions, and taking advantage of digitalization. Okay, but that's very interesting so far.
Well, I just to conclude, I mean, so you know, this is what we do in an MBA program to provide the right platform from which MBAs can plan out their careers. You know, let's look at an industry, let's look at the trends, let's look at the emerging skills, and then let's again, you know, let's look at an org chart of a pharma company. Let's say, how is it divided? So, what are the departments? You know, R&D, corporate, commercial, whatever. And then within those departments, say, now, given all that, which department could you be pitching and for what kind of role? And then the clarity emerges, and then it becomes much easier, I think, to really have more constructive conversations around career perspectives.
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's have a look at your employment reports. Is that possible? You would be interested to hear about how well St. Gallen graduates do after their MBA.
I can, oh gosh, okay. You would like me to see, or can I just talk about the report? Is that okay?
You can talk about it, you can share your screen, whatever you prefer.
I can talk about it, it's fine.
That's perfect, that's fine.
So there are, in terms of careers outcomes, at the end of the day, people want to know some hard facts, right? And so I want to position those hard facts in a context, because context is always important to understand the numbers. Numbers alone don't tell the story. So we have full-time and part-time program, and the average, looking at the last 5 years worth of salaries, and all this can be found on our employment reports, which you can all download from our website. Okay. and take time to read. The total salary, including perks and the total comp for a full-time program is 120,000 Swiss franc. For the part-time program is higher, 135. The difference I need to explain is that in the part-time programs, our audience is local, in the full-time, it's global. So what does it mean? The part-timers have already been here, they've already built their network, they've already worked here for, let's say, 3 years. They speak the language, which gives them, you know, that additional boost. But it also shows the full-timers, you know, where they can be. Was the full-time audience comes largely from outside. Jonas can correct me if I'm wrong here. So we do see 50% from Europeans in the classroom or from EU, and then we see another 50% from outside. So it's a very international program. So in pure facts, you know, that's the average. Now, I would encourage you all to download those reports and look at them, because what's important, and I think it's much more meaningful, is not to look at the averages, but to look at the full range. So how do those salaries look like before, and where do they move afterwards? And we have a very nice graph that illustrates that. And then those ranges at the low end and the high end are pretty much determined by your personal ambition. Where did you start, your personal journey, and the ambition going forward? Where did you start and where are you going to? So we have some extreme cases, let's say, in our program where, you know, we do actually this year have a lady who's a musician, effectively.
A musician who did an MBA.
Yes, a musician, and she's landed a fantastic job with TikTok in Berlin. So there you go. You can make that transformation even as a musician. But, you know, the salary ranges that she will be looking at will be different from somebody who let's say, you know, they're working in Italy already as a consultant. So they, again, I don't want to quote the numbers here, but you can imagine what in Italy a consultant works, and they land a job as a consultant in Switzerland. So what would that increase in salary be, right? What would be the range again, and how does that map out in terms of percentage increase? So we have seen increases in salaries from, you know, anywhere from 20% to 800%. So, you know, there's no single answer to that. But I just want to say one thing. The quality of life in Switzerland is pretty good. Whatever salary you get, and 70% of people land a job in Switzerland with us, your purchasing power is going to be pretty good. You know, we benefit from not only low corporate tax, but also low income tax. And that actually means that our students are able to secure for themselves a pretty good quality of life here. Now, whether their starting point salary is 90, 120, or 150, you know, that's actually a little bit less relevant. And so this is how I like to think about things.
Thanks a lot. I can add from my personal MBA experience that the benefit of an MBA goes beyond financial numbers. It also has to do with satisfaction in your job, with the abilities and options to choose the job that I feel comfortable with. That is my dream job, ideally, rather than being forced to take the first offer I receive. Beyond numbers that you just presented to us. And Jonas, thank you for publishing the full-time and part-time MBA reports here. I think there is more than only a financial aspect of an MBA benefit. Just to add that from my personal experience.
There are also some interesting facts and figures that we've included this year, because for the first time we've done a more extensive report, not just covering last year, which we all know was an extraordinary year. We wanted to highlight the performance of those career outcomes over the last 5 years, but also, interestingly, to debunk some of the myths about where the highest salaries are. And I think at some point we said, is it finance? Well, no, actually not really. So the highest salaries secured in the last 5 years in the full-time program have been, I've made a note of that, not to make a mistake, in technology, manufacturing, and healthcare. Not all in finance and consulting, but when we look at the part-time profiles, the highest salaries are still in finance, consulting, and healthcare. So I think, you know, if you're thinking about Switzerland, and that would make me very happy, you know, don't just think finance. The picture here is actually much more interesting than that.
Sounds like that. I remember in previous conversation with Jonas that, Jonas, you mentioned that Switzerland right now is the perfect place for learning about international business. Can you tell us a bit more about why Switzerland is such a good place for learning about international business?
Is this a question to Jonas?
It's a question to Jonas, yes.
Yes.
Yes, of course. So I just want to quickly give you a bit of context. We work very closely within the program, and we're very data-driven as well. And I had the pleasure of speaking to a couple of professors a while back who said that Switzerland was the perfect place simply because Switzerland itself is not a self-sustainable economy. If you look at Switzerland, they really, really highly rely on Asia, the US, and Europe. the rest of Europe as sparring partners, and they have a fairly diverse economy. So what we teach in the MBA program is actually specifically, how do you make commercial decisions? How do you drive business? How do you as an MBA make sure that you actually, if you work in Switzerland, really consider how do you operate in such a diverse environment? Whereas if you, for example, is in the US, and that's a very good example, very much in the MBA, what is being taught there is very US-centric, because they don't have to care about Europe, you know, in the same way as we have to. And Switzerland, if you look at within Europe, they really have to think about EU as a partner. They have to look at Germany in particular, because that's a big partner. They have to now look at the UK, and they do bilateral different agreements with them. They now have free trade agreement with China outside of the European Union. So it's a very, very complex set of trade deals. And that's also something we focus on in the MBA and have conversations about in the cases as a business that operates in a global environment. How do you need, as an MBA, how do you need to take that into account for decision making? So I'm just really referring more to what two professors and we had a conversation about a few months back.
All right. Okay.
I'd like to build on that a little bit, if possible, is from what just Jonas said, is it's again a very strange sort of country. So if you just look at the number of businesses, over 90% are SMEs. But if you look at the number of people and where they're working, over 60% are working in international companies. So it's because we have so many international headquarters here. So from that perspective, yes, you're entering an international career already in Switzerland, but it also sets you up quite nicely to move on to to experience a global career if you want to. Yes, and the other thing is Switzerland has no.
Okay, super, es freut mich, alles klar.
Sorry.
I think I can mute this person.
No, I muted him. I take care of it.
And what I was going to say, yes, Switzerland has no natural resources. You know, we really don't. Our only resource is talent. And in the last 7 years, on the global competitive talent index, Switzerland has maintained its #1 position. So I think it's a nice way of thinking about it, because it sort of says, do you identify yourself as a high-performing talent or talent that has a potential to perform? And if so, do you actively choose to enter a program that sets you up for an international career within a high-talent performing environment? I mean, this is what we need to be clear with all candidates. This is not a B game. This is an A game. You need to be an A game player. So we want to be aspirational, but equally we want our candidates to be aspirational. We want them to already identify themselves as people, as high performance. And the purpose of the program is to accelerate that performance. But it's not easy. It's not easy because, it's a very competitive environment. But this is exactly why we find our job challenging and fun.
Now that you just mentioned your MBA students and high achievers, people who like challenges, can we learn more about them? You mentioned already the musician, you mentioned the consultant. Can we take some minutes to talk more about the career trajectories? What kind of people are in your class? What trajectories, what career perspectives do they face afterwards? Can we go into this a little bit?
Yeah, so I'd like to look at two things, people coming in and people going out. So in general, that varies from year to year, and Jonas will have the numbers in his head. But I would say in general, we think about buckets, right? So there is typically a bucket of finance/consulting people. There's typically a bucket of engineers, and then there will be a bucket of general profiles. When they come out, here I want to say, particularly for, let's just say, high performing outcomes or high careers outcomes, we see a pattern emerging that we see 3 buckets being considered as high attraction profiles, meaning they generate the highest interest from potential employers.
Among the employers.
Yeah, and these would be profiles that have functional experience in business development, stroke marketing, stroke account management. That's one bucket. The other one is technology. So again, it's not about being an IT engineer, but let's say you have sold a digital product, you've worked for Uber or for Apple at some point, or company, or maybe even in hospitality, and you've been you know, selling or creating digital solutions. And so this is about product development, product design, let's say, or product management. And then we still see the sort of finance stroke consulting, high traction profiles. I want to note that it's not as straightforward as that. Consulting here in this country means you have to speak German and be a native speaker. In terms of finance, let's say backgrounds in corporate finance are somewhat more attractive than accounting background. So, I mean, you know, we could go deeper, probably not the forum here. So you see that, you know, there is space for generalists coming in at the moment, and we see a nice split between finance consulting and, let's say, STEM backgrounds. And then going out, we see these three buckets emerging very, very strongly. And that helps us actually to make that story, to make the two ends meet sensibly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. I received a question here. Can we add that at the moment? There's a question from Pascal Lettchen. I don't think we have spoken of the general requirements for applying for an MBA at HSS at the University of St.Gallen. Can we dive a bit into that part? What about the minimal post-grad work experience? Is there a minimal or average GMAT or GRE score? What about language certificates needed?
Jonas.
Yeah, so I was just about to say that would be a question for me. So it's a little bit linked to what Ewa is talking about here, because to go back to, in order to explain the requirements, I think I also quickly need to explain what we're looking for and why. Because for us, it's very, very important that whoever we admit into the program, we believe that the MBA will add value. Whether it is in terms of skills that you acquire to be able to do more, or in terms of your personal journey or career transitioning, doesn't really matter. But for us, it's very important that it matters. So one of the requirements naturally is work experience. It's actually quite important for us to have an understanding of what your previous background is. So we ask for minimum 3 years. The average is 6 years in both full-time and part-time. We do ask for GMAT, or we also have our own admissions test. So in the part-time program, 90% take our own admissions test, because
which is easier.
It's more relevant, to be very honest. It's 2 courses designed by Harvard Business Publishing, specifically with the aim for preparing students for an MBA. So it's much more relevant than a general admissions test that is used for undergrads and masters. But we only give that 10% in our overall assessment. So we look at 90% of it. So 40% goes to your professional background, and then 50% goes to the admissions interview. And the admissions interview is super important to us, because that's exactly where we can see, do we, beyond your professional background and also beyond what potential recruiters would, beyond what or how potential recruiters would pursue your profile, we really look at character traits here, because, and Ewa, I'm sure that you can back me up on this here, but we do see a strong correlation between character traits and outcomes as well. Every year there's people in the full-time program that surprises us. We try to predict what people would do, but we really never can do it. We do see people do triple change. So that's super, super important for us. And also, please bear in mind, and that's not being mentioned here because the topic is career perspective with an MBA generally. This is a bit more specific for St.Gallen. We only admit about 40 to 50 students every year. And that is by choice, because we do believe in that individual attention that we give our students, and we do believe in the individual journey. So go back to the requirements. It's not a black and white. We ask for GMAT, we ask for minimum experience. We do ask for a bachelor's degree. That is a requirement. But then everything else is a little bit individual. So what we do recommend, and for anyone who potentially would like to learn more about our program, please reach out to us and have an individual conversation before you apply, because that's where we try to assess, do we believe that our MBA would be the right match? I could also give you a bit of an insight. Every single application is actually being reviewed by the careers team as well. Not that an MBA guarantees a job or a specific outcome, but we do want to somehow see if we can minimize the risk. And what we mean with risk is that it's a big investment for you, but it's also a very big investment for us. I'm head of alumni as well, and we do believe in alumni. So imagine that we take someone in where the MBA doesn't add any value, then you will become a very unhappy alumni, and then it will actually damage our brand. So for us, that's super, super important. Language, it's entirely taught in English. All corporate interactions is in English, etc. Sometimes there might be German specific events that's corporate related simply because of the role or they're recruiting for or something like that, but it's entirely taught in English. And we typically have in the full-time program typically about 25 different nationalities, in the part-time typically around 15 to 18 different nationalities. So even though the part-time is regional, it's still truly global in the mindset, and the people that we attract in our part-time program is also people who typically would like to have an international mindset in the program. So even though you might be based in Switzerland, Germany, you may work for multinational companies, you may want to have a bit more of an international scope in your learning. I don't know if that answers the question.
It answers the question. You mentioned the word personal traits. Is that entrepreneurial mindset what you mean, for example, with personal traits?
It is definitely one of them, but we also look at, we do want people who are resilient. We do want people who are able to take ownership of their life and career. We do want people who have a very caring mindset. So we do not foster competitive mindset. I think the beauty of an MBA is that people come in with different objectives and different reasons. So you don't go out and necessarily compete directly for the same roles, because we place very diverse our students. So we very much look for a caring mindset and collaborative mindset. And we also look at, do we believe that you also have a certain foundation of skill sets and the mindset to share your skills as well and teach others. So if you are a hardcore mathematician or finance person, for example, we expect that you, when someone is struggling in finance or accounting, that you go in and help. For two reasons. It helps the other person's learning. Them being better will not harm you, on the contrary. And it also, let's say, gives you another level of learning about your own skills. Because if you've been an accountant and working as a CPA qualified auditor, for example, you don't have to think about speaking about, let's say, use a certain terminology with your colleagues. How do you explain what the items in a balance sheet is? But when you have an architect who say, yeah, but why do you do that? And you start thinking and you start explaining, then you learn more about yourself. So we also want to see, do you have that kind of mindset as well?
Again, I can add from my personal experience that I learned about 50%, I would say, for what I learned from an MBA. I learned it through my classmates and their competencies and propensity to help. Eva, let's come. Yeah, of course, please.
Build on what Jonas just said. We do not foster competitive mindset, but we definitely foster a high performance mindset. And so we're looking for, for me, it's very difficult to measure motivation or to even assess it. It is possible, it's difficult.
Psychological tests?
Yeah, it's actually an interview. It's a qualitative research. So you can do it. And of course, people's motivation can change, but we want to have a sense that you are a motivated person. Whoever applies to a program is a motivated person who wants to perform, and at their peak. I think this is very important. So no competitiveness, very much about collaboration, but what is it that we are all together capable of at our very best? That's what we want to see in the classroom.
All right. And in the interview, I guess. Sorry? And in the interview.
And in the interview, yes. But also, please bear in mind, the interview is not there to destroy you. The interview is designed to get the best out of you. So.
Right. To get the best out of you. Maybe let's come back to the more general perspectives on his career perspectives with an MBA. Imagine someone, and we have lots of MBA candidates here tonight, someone really considers, there are thousands of MBA programs and many, many business schools, international accredited business schools, and someone really discusses this question: which MBA provides me with the strongest career perspectives? this question, I think everyone has to some point, every MBA candidate in his or her mind, and it automatically leads to the question of a fit, the fit between the school, the program, and the person. What recommendations, what tips, what kind of rules of thumb could you give to that person? How to find out the right school with the right fit regarding the career perspectives?
I think actually it's a, Thomas, I like the way you say it's a fit. It's definitely about a fit, but I think it's not the fit between the person and the school. It's a fit between that person's career plan and that school.
All right.
So if you, you know, think about where you are right now, what job or function you're in at the moment, and where do you want to end up? And now what school will facilitate that? And the three, of course, I mean, we're familiar with this in our industry. We talk about the triple change, right? So, and actually, so the triple change, for those who don't know about that, is changing country, industry, and function. But there is another thing that we all ask everybody to consider. Consider your three career questions when thinking about that. Am I moving up? So I'm a consultant in Germany. I'd like to be a consultant in Germany, but at a higher position. Or maybe at a higher position in Switzerland. Okay, one option. Or am I adjusting? So this is the diagonal route. So maybe I keep my function, but I'm changing industry. So maybe I'm a finance person, and I'm going to get out of financial services. Maybe I've been working in a bank and I've just had enough of that. And I want to enter industry, or I've been in consulting and that happens, right? We've been in consulting and, you know, actually I don't really want to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week until I'm 50 and can hardly walk. So, you know, at some point I want to move into industry. So that's kind of, you know, but I'm taking my skill set, let's say, so I'm just making one or two changes. Or am I moving out, meaning I'm changing completely? I come from, let's say, Brazil. I've been, I don't know, at the most extreme, an architect, right? And I come to Switzerland and I end up
for UBS
with a job in, let's say, the marketing function, because actually architects go really nicely into marketing function because they can think visually, conceptually. So, you know, everything's possible. Actually, everything's possible. But when deciding to choose the school, you need to connect the dots. And the dots to connect at either extreme is, where would I like to be in 5 years? What is my career plan? Where am I now? And then which MBA will propel me in the right direction? It may not get me there immediately post MBA, but it is definitely going to be the right stepping stone in the right direction. That's the fit to consider. And then everything becomes a little bit easy, right? So then you start to look at geography, you start to look at, okay, which schools specialize in what? You look at the employment reports, career outcomes, you know, maybe none of these 5 interested industries that we showcase in our program are of relevance to you. Fine, then you need to look elsewhere.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I train a lot and help a lot of students, professionals basically, to find the right program through workshops, through my own platforms, through private consulting. And I always, also in my book about finding the right program, I always propel and propose actually that there are 3 general benefits that I can get from an MBA program on a very general level. Benefit number 1 is competence. In a broad way, it can be information, it can be skills, it can be business knowledge, it can be leadership competence, etc. Competence. Second, network, through alumni clubs, through your classmates, through professors, even to the industry. And third, reputation. Reputation vis-a-vis an employer, reputation among your existing employer or new employers, potential future employers. So these, for me, always were the 3 key benefits that I can expect from an MBA: competence, network, and benefits, and reputation, excuse me. Would you agree to that structure, or did I miss something here?
I think I would agree to it. Historically, this is probably the correct way of thinking about it. people
historically.
Historically, yes, historically, definitely not into the future, but historically we think about these three: what will I learn? And then you think about the gaps you have, both, you know, sort of on the hardcore side and on the softer side. I put that all into one package. This is the management.
It's competence for me. It's the area of competence.
Toolkit, or you call it competence.
Yeah.
There's the network and there's the brand that you want to have on your CV. I think going forward, and again, you're going to very much, you know, so if you're looking at locating, and I can only use our school example because it's all I know, but if you want to enter Switzerland, which school's brand do you want to have, right? I mean, and do you want to be in the German-speaking parts of Switzerland or another part of Switzerland? So network will come out of that, right? And the skill set is, you know, one could argue all MBA programs that, you know, are all vanilla, right? They're all kind of the same. There are small differences, but yes, in general, you're getting a general management toolkit. I think going forward, this is not going to be so simple as that. Going forward, I think with the increased pressure to meet the employer demands, we will need to demonstrate that our program really develops the right people with the right mindset, the right competencies to be the right talent for the future. So I think this, you know, I'm a little bit of a skeptic around the brand, to be honest. I think it's a bit of an abstract concept. I know we all use it. I know I use it in my job. Me having the St.Gallen brand on my CV helps me walk into many offices. But in the future, I think we're going to have to be much more precise about it, to what degree is a program as well, the program curriculum, really developing people in the right direction. And that's certainly what we are going to be already and will be looking at in our program.
Very interesting point. Jonas, you wanted to mention something here?
Yes, it's more, you ask what the benefits are, and being so engaged with alumni. So as I said, I'm head of alumni as well. So I think it's a really good question, because I do agree with you with the benefits, but talking to alumni after they've done the MBA, I think that speaks volume of what you get out of the experience as well. And there, I would say definitely what we hear over and over again is that by going through an MBA, whether it's full-time or part-time, you get such a strong awareness about yourself and your behaviors and your competencies that gives you confidence to credibly go out in the market and manage your career and make choices that you believe is the right choices for you. So really take ownership simply just by going through either the hard part of the MBA by, you know, deep diving into a topic that you didn't know and heated group discussions and case solving, or going through the coaching or the peer-to-peer sessions or the leadership workshops. So confidence, I think, is something that a lot of people underestimate, because the more you learn, the more confident you get, but also the more aware you get about yourself, the more comfortable, the more confident you are in yourself that you can manage the future, even regardless of what brings, you know, brings towards you. That's one thing. And secondly, I would say efficiency. So when I talk to alumni and say how they have used the MBA skills, they just say, I can't really articulate it that it's a one skill, but I have just become efficiently at everything I do. Because when you do an MBA, especially part-time, when you work and study at the same time, you're forced to become efficient. And because you elevate your skill set and your toolkit, you can do more very quicker and indirectly then also expose yourself to new opportunities. So that efficiency level is very important. And then I would say the whole, yes, the network. And there I have to say what is unique, and I think it is unique about St.Gallen, is that we're so European driven. So most of our community, even though they come from abroad when they start the MBA full-time, they actually stay in our region. And that means that you can foster very long-term meaningful friendships, not just professional relationships, but friendships. And I say this because it's only recent, like after the last couple of years, where I always thought about an international network and all of these things. No, we can see when we have events that we have homecoming coming up very soon. And we have some classes where that more or less half the class is there, even though they graduated 6-7 years ago. And that for me is very, very unique. And that is also the value of network. So sorry about talking, but I do think the experience is, as I always say, just as powerful as the degree itself.
Yeah.
Very valuable contribution.
And this is much more of an emotional thing. Like you build friendships, you build network. This is wonderful. And I just want to add one last benefit is thinking not so much about skills, but it's not so much about brand, but an MBA is a passport. It's like getting a passport, right? Or driving license. I like to use the word driving license. You have a driving license, doesn't mean you can drive very well, but you're allowed to get in a car and drive. Having an MBA is like a passport. It means it will open opportunities that would otherwise not be open to you, whether you take them or whether they're good for you. That's another matter. But my goodness, I wish I had done an MBA when I was 30. There's no way I'm doing it now. But, you know, to have that passport for the rest of your life, wow, you know, why wouldn't you do it, frankly?
Coming back to the benefits of an MBA, Louise just asked, coming back to skills, how about leadership skills being addressed during MBA, especially with a focus towards future?
So actually in the core phase, 30% of our curriculum is dedicated to so-called people skills. I find the word leadership a bit misleading. So we have it's a program within a program, and on the full-time it's called career development, and on the part-time leadership acceleration, but they're very similar. And so we look at topics like team dynamics. We look at personal development, which includes coaching. We look at professional development, which very much focuses on communication. And yes, we have a course called leadership development, although the focus of it is not as you might expect. So teaching leadership skills in MBA, yes. Are those the skills that you will most use in your job post-MBA? Possibly not. But is it important to develop as a person and to become a people manager, black belt type person? Yes, because even if you're not managing a large team, or maybe you're not managing a team at all post-MBA, because if you go into consultancy, you're going to be consultant. You don't manage a team. You're part of the team. Yeah, you're part of the team, but you still need to work with people. So working with people, essential. The question here says, how does it work? You know, how is it designed towards the future? I mean, there are some obvious answers to that, is that the future will be different. The future will be more digital. There will be more remote communication, and you will need to work differently with people. That's number one. And the future of learning is different. So no one wants to sit in a classroom and listen for 5 days about the theory of leadership. We stopped doing that 10 years ago. So leadership training or people training, I prefer to call it people training. It's just you work with people. It's as simple as that, right? Whether you're a boss or not, leader or team player or team person, can you work with people? Because it's essential. So we stopped, you know, teaching theories around those topics. We put people from pure experiential kind of experience. So, you know, team dynamics is off you go. We're going to the mountains, and you're going to be doing some physical exercises. We're going to put you under stress, and as they say, you know, there's nothing like getting to know a person. And when you put them under pressure, it's like squeezing a bottle of orange juice. You know, when you squeeze the carton, the juicy part comes out. That's what we do. And in leadership, we have an acting company. Actually, we fly an acting company from the UK. It sounds like you know, very champagne kind of exercise. My God, no, it's really hands-on, and it's you know, people get really flustered, and that's
an acting company. So it's about role playing.
Yes, but not just role playing. I mean, like extreme role playing. You know, and it's great.
What does that mean?
It's playing through scenarios that are relatively difficult to play through. You know, crisis, a moment of crisis. How do you deal with that? And those can be really silly kind of exercises, but they're really serious at the same time. So, you know, I love this stuff. You know, you know, trying to persuade somebody to do something. So how do we get somebody to move from, you know, A to B? They will literally get them to lie on the floor and say, okay, persuade this person to get up. How can you persuade this person to get up, right? And so you get into all this persuasion toolkit. the emotional, the factual, and so on. These are the sort of crazy games, but at the same time, this is so serious and it is so important. You can't work with people, forget it. You know, go to, I don't know, meditate as a monk. Everybody needs to work with people. That's just what the future of work looks like.
Very true, very true. Yeah, we are nearly at the end. A couple of more minutes, guys. You have the final chance to pose your questions. In the meantime, I would like to take the opportunity to make you aware of a special scholarship cooperation between Jonas and me, or less personal, between the University of St. Gallen and eFellowsNet, because the University of St. Gallen provides exclusive scholarships just for eFellows every year. And I just post the link where you can find more information on that. You are not in competition with people from outside of eFellowsNet asking for the same scholarship, so the chances to get a scholarship may be higher than for the other ones. And as far as I'm informed, you can apply for other scholarships as well through the financial aid website of the University of St. Gallen. So hopefully this is beneficial for you. Any final question from your side, dear eFellows? I have a final one. It's a provocative one, if I'm allowed to.
Go for it.
What would you say? For whom is the MBA of St. Gallen not suited? For whom it's the worst program in the world? Take your time.
Can I go first, Eva?
Go.
Because I think there's different views. Because I'm doing the pre-assessments of candidates. I really dislike, if I may say, and I don't think it's the right motivation, if people mainly look at an MBA program based on just putting it on their CV. Being with the MBA and looking back at 8 years with the MBA, there has to be this intrinsic motivation towards learning and driving yourself. And not just because it fits into a CV or because you believe that would give you that next. No, it really has to come from. So for me, there is kind of someone that does not demonstrate actually the benefits of an MBA, but mainly just do it to get it on their CV. Someone who can come and say, yeah, but I feel I need it because otherwise I can't get promoted. It's good. That might be a company structure that requires to have an MBA. But if that's the mindset, you'll not be able to emerge fully into the experience and gain from the MBA. That's just one of the things that's top of mind, that comes top of mind to me.
Mm-hmm. And I've just now had time to think. So from the careers department perspective, the worst type of candidate or student in the program is one that comes with a fixed mindset. So they will literally say, you know, I have a job at KPMG, I want a job at McKinsey, give me the job.
Okay.
In other words, they have a prefix idea of, you know, where they're going to land. So all that exploratory time during the program of uncovering who you are, your skill set, which ones you can build up from and which ones we need to shore up, and all the opportunities that are there in front of you. They're just saying no to all of that. They're just saying, give me a contact, I need a job, right? These are the people actually we don't want to see in the program. We want to see people who come with enormous ambition around their careers, but people who are willing to have an open mindset and who are willing to explore themselves and the opportunities and go in a direction that ultimately is really meaningful to them. That's what we want.
That makes a lot of sense. And I learned a lot from you today. Even I'm in that business for a long time. I do marketing. I teach MBA students. I have been an MBA student myself. But I learned a lot through you today, particularly qualifying the right people for the right jobs in the future. The word right and the word fit is something that I take with me as a takeaway. So I hope that for everyone who participated today, this was helpful and beneficial. And it's 7 o'clock. We're right on time.
Thomas,
Eva
thank
and
you
Jonas,
so much.
thank you so much for your time. It's not that we can have you every day. So I'm really grateful to have you with us and for providing such important information.
It was a pleasure. Thomas, just a quick question, because in case someone has specific questions, I know this is general about MBAs, and I do believe that research is a very, very important part of selecting an MBA. Will the participants get our details, or how would that work? I'm just wondering, because I could imagine there's a few who might have additional questions.
Every e-fellow who applied for this event agreed that you can contact him or her one time. So they don't want to get on the newsletter.
So I get their details, so okay.
Exactly.
So then for those who are here, you can expect an email just as a thank you for listening.
And if I was you,
I
would enter in that email. If you want to stay in contact and receive more information from us, please confirm here. And then you, and also we record that webinar and consider publishing it for people who could not attend today. But again, thank you very much. That was pretty intense. I wish everyone a fantastic evening, hopefully with sunshine. We see each other around. I just posted a link to our webinar website because we have more webinars to come up soon. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Michael, for the feedback. That's good to hear. And Eva, Jonas, we see each other and we talk soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.